Hi everyone, this is For the Love of Comics and a warm welcome to a quick look at a very special edition of Mouse Guard. This is a black and white, oversized, deluxe hardcover slipcased edition that I found purely by accident. I've talked about Mouse Guard before on this channel. This is one of my favorite comics, and if you're not familiar with David Petersen's excellent medieval fantasy series, I'd recommend you check out my Why is Mouse Guard one of my favorite comics video. Now, it was a decade or more ago that I was on eBay searching for single issues of Mouse Guard. I had recently read these two volumes back then, Fall 1152 and Winter 1152, but I'd also heard that Archaia, the publisher of Mouse Guard, had these free comic book day issues that had not been collected in any volume. Now, these free comic book day issues were eventually collected, but back then these are what I was looking for. But the search for those threw up one thing that said black and white Mouse Guard oversized, and those are all words I really like. There was only one image that showed this square. There was no sense of scale or anything, but it did say slipcase shows wear. So I cunningly deduced that it was a slipcased edition. Then one of those magical eBay stories took place. It was listed at a starting price that was quite reasonable for something that it was describing as oversized slipcase, about $30, I think. There were no bids on it. I placed one bid, and as it goes, that ended up being the only bid on it, and I won. Of course, once I had won it, I had to wait for a year to get my hands on it because it was shipped to my sister in the US, a process that I've described and illustrated in my Great Comics Unboxing of 2022 videos. And when I finally got to take a look at it, was I happy? Most immediately obvious, it was definitely oversized compared to the collected editions, which were the same size as the single issues. And yes, the copy that I picked up did have a slightly worn slipcase, with even the spine text showing some fading. But the book inside the slipcase looked untouched, with this beautiful cloth cover. I wouldn't call this velvety, it is that traditional matte cloth feeling, perhaps most reminiscent of the Hellboy library editions. Now, I've long held the Hellboy library editions to be some of the most beautiful editions, if not the most beautiful editions of comics that I've seen. Not just because of their handsome production value, but because of how well they manage that elegance of presentation of an object with the reading practicality and pleasure. But this edition of Mouse Guard did make me wonder if the one thing these library editions of Hellboy could maybe take as an improvement would be a slipcase. That's because the described wear on the slipcase obviously keeps that wear from touching the book, the main purpose of a slipcase. I really have no problems with worn or beaten up slipcases. They show that they've done the job and preserved the book, which is the important thing. And with this kind of cloth cover, which itself has very light embossing of heroic mice figures on it, this kind of cover some people find to be dust magnets. And if that's the case, the slipcase to protect it makes perfect sense. The slipcase itself is solid, handsomely and elegantly designed and produced, and combined with the square format of the Mouse Guard series gives the feeling of an LP vinyl box set. So that's the oversized and the slipcase part of this edition. But what I was really excited about, obviously, was the fact that this is a black and white rendition of the comic, specifically of the first volume, Fall 1152, comprising 6 issues. Surprisingly not mentioned as part of the eBay listing was that apparently this is one of 1,000 copies. But I don't really care about that. I wish this was more easily available for everyone because, surprise, surprise, I love this edition. David Petersen originally designed and did the first issue of Mouse Guard as a black and white comic. When it was picked up by Archaia, they insisted on it being colored, something that wasn't part of his plan, as he says in this preface. Although he had a specific idea for what the colors of this world look like, he had designed and done this comic as a black and white comic. And he mentions that he was most worried about the cross-hatching and the tippling, the way that he had made the shadows and the line work appear in this comic. He was worried that they would become muddied or lost when this was colored. The colors turned out beautiful, and Mouse Guard has received praise for its color palette, but seeing the art oversized and in black and white right next to it, I think there's a fair difference. Over here, the tree trunk and the night sky is obviously much more texture in the black and white than in the color, but the moon seems to be much more distinct and contrasted in the color version than over here, where it really comes across as a glowing mist. Now, which one works better for the story is up to you to decide, but I love being able to make this comparison. In the black and white, you also have to rely on the mouse figures to be able to distinguish them from each other, something that is helped by the colors of their capes in the color edition. But I think the black and white gives a much starker and edgier tone to the story, a story which already is something that plays it perfectly straight as a medieval fantasy. There's no satire or there's no jokes. This is not a funny comic. This is an adventure comic steeped in survival, and the black and white really adds to that grittiness. In my praising Mouse Guard to people, I've often encountered the idea that people think of this as a children's book, and I can't help but think that the color might have something to do with that as well. The black and white also seems to draw it into a different culture, a culture of the independent American black and white comic, even an anthropomorphic comic like Cerebus and ElfQuest and even Usagi Yojimbo. I think reading this series in black and white might make that link stronger in some readers' minds. The one thing I see no question about is how it celebrates David Petersen's line work and art. Of course, David Petersen does beautiful things with color in this story. At nighttime, during the rain, by firelight, at a blood red sunrise. But I was fascinated to see how effectively they still worked in black and white. Often, as I was saying, creating a different impression of the story, one that is a little more haunting, a little bit more stark, a little bit more brutal. And the series in its regular form can be pretty brutal in itself. Because these are the final inks, this is not an artist edition or anything with pencil work or line work. These are complete pages just without the color that they originally weren't even supposed to have. Because of that, this is a fantastic read by itself. You don't really need to have read this Mouse Guard in order to appreciate this Mouse Guard. The first volume, the first story, the full story is here, and it is in an impeccable, beautiful format. And as if all of this wasn't enough, this special edition had one more trick up its sleeve. In Mouse Guard, when we have rain, it looks like this, and it had always looked to me as if it had been scratched away, maybe a scratchboard technique similar to the one Thomas Ott uses. But I knew that it looked lovely, but I obviously had no idea how it was done. Hadn't even crossed my mind, how does this paint stay distinct from the paint that it's being put on, etc. What this edition showed me is that the rain was actually drawn on a separate sheet, a sheet of vellum, and put over the image. So the splashes at points of contact, the outlining of the curve of the face is all done in a way that doesn't muddy up or interfere with the other line work, but can be reproduced when copied. These are the only pages that you might think of as being process pages, the rest of the book being a finished book, but it's a beautiful and elegant presentation. And there's plenty of it. Mouse Guard, the first volume, has a lot of rain. The entire climax, to a certain extent, takes place during a rainstorm. And I can just spend hours going over the silhouetted drawings and then the re-silhouetting through the raindrops. It makes for an interesting game. Here's a dry page, and now here is the page with rain splashing down on everyone. This is a dry panel. This is from outside with the rain. Here you can see some of the rain through the gap of the door, and then the drenched mouse walking through the door. These creamy vellum pages just add to the deluxe feel, but the fact that they're purely practical, illustrative, and educational, just giving me, someone who has no sense of art and how it is put together, giving me such an insight. I do often feel that this alone is worth the admittedly bargain price that I paid for this edition. A truly lovely and revelatory edition. Now, given the gorgeous deluxe format and the fact that it was apparently a limited edition, I thought this was a one-time celebration of Mouse Guard, brought out because of the insistence of the author, as he said in his preface. And I loved it, and I thought that's all there was, which is why I was so surprised in a bookstore in India, of all places, to run across Winter 1152, another limited edition hardcover, exactly in the same format edition of Mouse Guard, this time of the second volume. I don't think I can accurately describe what I felt when I found this. It was battered with a lot of that so-called shelfware, but once again, the inside looked impeccable. Even the spine wasn't worn out this time. The Winter 1152 black and white edition is bigger and heavier. I think it's few more pages. This one's 885. And many people would consider David Petersen really stepping up his game with this volume, where his art style and layout leaped forward. And being set in the winter and covered with snow, we get some more vellum pages with weather effects on top of the black and white line artwork. This time from the very beginning of chapter 1. Once again, top-notch production, impeccable reproduction of some fantastic art and storytelling, highlighting and spotlighting for us every facet of David Petersen's amazing creation, his artwork, his layouts, his panel work, his detail and design, but also his lettering. The classic epic feeling of these desperate adventures is once again superbly captured in this presentation. The glossy pages over here really work for the depth of the blacks for me. This is reminiscent of Black Hole by Charles Burns, and maybe even more so than Fall 1152. Winter 1152 in this black and white edition took on a thrilling new dimension. And once I brought this home and devoured it, I figured there must be one for the Black Axe. And I was right. This is the only one that I've been able to buy directly from Archaia. It was still in stock with them when I was looking. Another limited edition, black and white, oversized edition of Mouse Guard, this time for the 3rd volume, the prequel, The Black Axe. Understandably, the least battered of my slipcases. Expected immaculateness in the design. And another absolutely gorgeous rendition of a terrific story. As a fan of Mouse Guard, someone who has read these stories multiple times, and especially now that I've made a couple of videos on them, I've gone back over them even recently. Even now, this takes my breath away. There's both cleanliness and chaos in a way that I don't think I'm able to appreciate with the color, even with something that I'm so familiar with and such a fan of. After all the years and all the rereading of Mouse Guard, to be able to find it as something new and fresh is truly an extraordinary thing for me. Each of these books, I think, retailed for about $60. The first 2 books I got for far less. I did pay $60 for this, but I think they're fantastic editions. I won't call them bargains because I understand $60 is a lot of money, but given what I've seen things priced at and given the nature of the production and the design and honestly the stories that these books are replicating, I find them to be absolutely worth the money that I paid for them. I would have paid double or even triple for these books. That's it for my quick look. If you want to see more Mouse Guard, check out my Mouse Guard videos as part of this list. If you'd like to see more looks at special editions, check out this other playlist. This has been For the Love of Comics. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you at the next video.